warmed up. All right. Greetings, all. Last time we left off with the salvation, the role of prayer in the High Middle Ages. This time we begin with the problem of sovereignty.
Now, growing out of the feudal system, regions throughout Europe began to consolidate through pledges of loyalty and conquest, and creating the issue of sovereignty. Now, sovereignty is inviolable authority over a defined territory. Sovereignty is won and maintained by diminishing that of other states. Philip Augustus was the first monarch to call himself King of France, not King of the Franks, thus defining his kingship geographically.
By the middle of the 13th century, the growth of strong territorial monarchies combined with the increasing sophistication of royal justice, taxation, and propaganda had given some secular rulers greater power than any European ruler had wielded since the time of Charlemagne. This growing strength can be seen throughout Europe, Spain, the Germanic lands up in Scandinavia, and even somewhat in the Italian city-states. Along all these emerging states, the two most successful in their assertion of sovereignty, of course, were France and England. Here we have Blanche of Castile and her son, King Louis IX. Blanche was a granddaughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine and daughter of King Alfonso VII of Castile and his Queen Eleanor of England. Well educated and politically savvy, Blanche became the de facto ruler of France when her husband, King Louis VIII, died, leaving her to raise her children and secure the throne for her son, Louis IX, who at that time was only 12. The fact that she did so successfully would pave the way for Louis's successful reign. Here, in a contemporary illumination, mother and son sit enthroned as equals in their palace in Paris. Their gestures show that Blanche is offering her son advice and instruction, which he is gladly receiving.
Now, some kings were saintly. We have Louis IX, who reigned between 1226 and 1270 and continues sovereignty's growth of the French kings. He was famous for piety and was a conscientious exerciser of his kingly duties. He participated in 2 crusades to save the church. Unfortunately, his absence prompted bureaucratic reform. He had the Champ Chapelle constructed to house the crown of thorns.
In announcing his support of Innocent IV, Louis IX received a customary levy on clerical incomes. After his failed crusade in Egypt and his return in 1254, Louis IX became a model crusader determined to retake Jerusalem. His pious reputation as a crusader was due to his determination to rescue the captured nobles, and his ultimate success, the final Crusader success really ever at Al-Masura, were really the high points of his failed crusade. However, the chief success would be by the Italians, not the French. And to quote Britannica here, the sectors acquired by the burgeoning Italian cities and the Crusader states would enable them to extend their trade with the Muslim world and led to the establishment of trade depots beyond Crusade frontiers, some of which lasted long after 1291.
Now, Edward took a different approach. Now, Edward I, who reigned between 1272 and 1307, built the English sovereignty from scratch. He was crowned in 1272. He tightened his control on the aristocracy and their lands. He diffused nobility's power by strengthening Parliament. He reformed the administration of the realm and clarified laws.
Edward had to build up the sovereignty of his state almost from scratch. His father, Henry III, 1216 to 72, had a long but troubled reign. Edward would begin a series of invasions of Wales from 1277 to 83, which results in a series of crusader fortresses being built to militarily suppress the Welsh resistance and, of course, end their independence. Edward would advance into Scotland in 1296 to stabilize the region. The claim to the Scottish throne was, let's just say, contested. Ultimately, John Balliol will abdicate and English control will last until the Scottish Wars of Independence.
Edward sought stability at home through the conquest of the rest of the British Isles, Wales particularly. He made treaties with the Welsh nobility. He built numerous castles, like Carnarvon Castle, and settled English people within Wales. He named his son as the Prince of Wales.
Edward embarked on an ambitious campaign of castle building, treating the Welsh as infidels. He treated conquered Wales like any crusader state, in case you hadn't picked up on that. He made it a settler colony, placing his power over that of the Welsh, giving his son, of course, the title Prince of Wales. And here we have Carnarvon Castle, one of many fortifications built by Edward I. This castle was the birthplace of the first Prince of Wales and the site where the former Prince of Wales, Charles, now Charles III, King of England, was formally invested with his title, the Prince of Wales, in 1969. It's since been passed to William. Castles of this size and strength had been constructed in the Crusader states on the disputed frontiers of Muslim and Christian Spain, but never before in Britain. What does their construction reveal about Edward's attitude toward the Welsh?
Now, Edward would turn his attention to Scotland as well. In 1290, there was a dispute over the succession to the Scottish throne. Edward I claimed the throne. The Scots forged an alliance with France, and Edward's army captured Scone Abbey in 1296, took the Stone of Scone, and brought it to London to be embedded in the coronation chair. His son, Edward II, who reigned from 1307 to 1327, was charged with the completion of his task. But not a ruthless and efficient advocate of English expansion, and had to contend with a rebellion led by his queen, Isabella of France, who engineered his abdication and murder.
Edward I considered the subjugation of Scotland to be England's version of manifest destiny. He called himself the Hammer of the Scots. Edward III, 1327 to 77, eventually renewed his grandfather's expansionist policies and targeting France instead. The Scottish, though, will ally with the French against him, but hey.
Well, the main source of conflict was Gascony. Now, Gascony was maintained as an Anglo Norman holding since 1154. The sovereignty concept suggested all land within natural borders could be claimed. French kings thus looked to continue and press claim for all land of Old Gaul. There were other causes. England had closed commercial links with Flanders, which resisted French imperialism. France had an alliance with Scotland, which resisted English imperialism.
The Hundred Years' War is the largest, longest, and widest ranging conflict since Rome's wars with Carthage. Although England and France were its principal antagonists, almost every major power became involved at some point. Active hostilities began in 1337 and would last, well, until 1453 in an on again, off again style fashion. Here we can see the disrupted nature of French succession in 1328, which might give you some idea as to why this was such a contested and long and drawn out conflict. Edward II was married to daughter Philip IV Isabella, thus, the son Edward III was in line for the French throne. In 1328, the last of Isabella's brothers died. His cousin in the Valois family will claim the throne. That's Philip. They will insist that succession not pass through a female line, however. Thus, the coronation of Philip VI in 1328, and in 1337, Edward III claims the French throne as a tactic during the growing disputes over Gascony and Scotland.
As one might expect, this brings conflict between France and England. Now, France was richer, more populous. The English crown was more effective in mobilizing the entire population. England maintained a professional army of seasoned and well disciplined soldiers, cavalrymen, and archers. Now, the large but virtually leaderless armies assembled by the French proved no match for the tactical superiority of the smaller English forces. Now, the English armies pillaged the French countryside while civil wars broke out between the French lords. Now, look at the French defeats. We have Crécy in 1346 and Calais in 1347.
For more on specific battles and pivotal points throughout this conflict, I would recommend you to the History Squad. He has excellent overviews of individual battles and an overview of the war in general that we cannot get to in here. But a decade after the declaration of war, for the French knights were defeated in two humiliating battles out of Crécy and Calais. The English would seem invincible, but they were no match for the plague.
To make matters worse, this all comes on the heels of the 7 Years' Famine. Now, between the years of 1315 and 1322, the cooling climate caused nearly continuous adverse weather conditions in Northern Europe. Now, during the Great Famine, we have 10 to 15% of the Northern European population died. We have the growth of epidemic diseases affecting animals and people. The prices climbed, and obviously the food decreased. The cities, obviously, were the hardest hit. And, of course, children were most susceptible to death.
Between 1000 and 1300, the population of Europe had tripled, but European agriculture was barely able to feed its people. The medieval warm period came to an end, which would be until the middle of the 18th century or so. The reduction of 1 to 2 degrees centigrade caused substantial change in rainfall patterns, shortened growing seasons, and decreased agricultural productivity. It's amazing, it's almost like what we're seeing right now.
Now, first famine, then plague, the Black Death, which was a global pandemic that spread from the Far East during the 1330s and the 1340s. In 1346, the plague reached the Black Sea and was transmitted to Genoese colonists at Kaffa. In 1347, Genoese ships brought it to Sicily, North Africa, and northern Italy. It spread westward along trade routes, striking ports, turning inland with travelers who carried it. By 1350, it had reached Scandinavia and northern Russia, and in a few decades, 40 to 60% of people in those afflicted areas had died.
So, the Great Famine, 1315 to 22, combined with the invasion of the Mongols who brought the Black Death, the religious turmoil of the Western Schism, 1378 to 1417, would make Europe politically and religiously divided. The internal weakening would set the bubonic plague up to be one of the largest recurring pandemics in Western history. I almost majored in disease study as an undergraduate, and this microbe was especially virulent because it can be contracted and manifested in many different ways: bubonic, septicemic, as well as pneumonic plague. Here we have a map of the European outbreaks of the Black Death 1347 to 50. What trajectories did the Black Death follow once it arrived in Europe? How might have the growth of towns, trade, and travel contributed to the spread of the Black Death? Would such a rapid advance have likely been would such a rapid advance have been likely during the early Middle Ages or even the ancient world? Why or why not?
Now, in 2011, scientists confirmed that the Black Death bacteria was the deadly microbe Yersinia pestis and that it originated in China. We have three: bubonic plague. Now, this is carried by fleas on the backs of animals. Humans bitten contract the plague through their lymphatic systems, and the results are eruption of enormous and painful swellings, also known as buboes, in the lymphic, no, or we could say the lymphatic nodes of the groin, neck, and armpits. Septicemic plague, which the flea introduces the microbe directly into the human bloodstream. It causes death within hours. The third is pneumonic plague, and this results when Y. pestis infects the lungs, which allows the contagion to spread in the same way as the common cold.
Black Death is terrifying because it's mysteriously inconsistent. Those affected of bubonic plague might recover, but others might suddenly drop dead for no apparent cause.
The reactions would vary. Observers realized that the plague was contagious, but how it spread remained unknown. Some believed it was caused by breathing bad air, and so urged people to flee from stricken areas, causing the disease to spread faster. There was a resignation to death. Eat, drink, and be merry, for today we die. And of course, the flagellant movement. Traveling bands of penitents lashed themselves with whips so to appease the wrath of God. We have the scapegoats. Rumors that Jews poisoned communal water sources. And of course, scores of Jewish communities were attacked and thousands were massacred. And of course, we have the inability for religious leaders to halt spread, which contributed to the decline in the influence of the church.
Immediate reactions to the plague would range from panic to violence to resignation. See the diary of Samuel Pepys if you want to read this in real time. Yes, it's from the 17th century, but it still applies here. The medieval world originally considered disease through miasma theory, bad air makes you sick, and linked it to religious infidels, the Jewish population, in other words, in an attempt to blame them, though. In short, this is seen by some as the Jewish population's fault, mostly for their refusal to Christ, or this was seen by some as the Jewish population's fault, partially because of their refusal of Christ, and the plague is a form of divine punishment by God. The blame is often placed on Jewish communities in a more realistic sense, due to the rising prices and inflation caused by the shutdown of trade and the Jewish population having a surplus of wealth to help and them being subsequently less impacted by the increase in prices. In other areas, particularly in the later instances of plague, it would be seen as a punishment for poor Christian behavior in targeting the As an example, mistreatment of wealth by the church and practice of simony. In actuality, though, as we mentioned, it's spread by fleas which bite human beings, regurgitate the infected blood or disinfected bacteria into the human body and make room for fresh, new, non diseased blood. Gross, right? But from there, it spreads to the lymphatic system, hides in there, and buboes form in the warmer parts of the body. Gangrene will eventually set in, and, well, death will occur due to the weakened immune systems from the Great Famine. Roughly some 25 million or more will die between 1347 and 52 alone. Then, much like now, trade routes and pedestrian travel are the primary vectors. Ports and airports are will ports and airports are the ones hit first. Diseases are carried from there, though. In the medieval and Renaissance, much like the modern world, quarantine is still the primary defense. It's amazing how few things change. Alright, y'all. Next time, we move on to chapter 11. Take it easy.